Hello and welcome back to Analyses Tottenham Blog and today's video with Alex, the Euro expert, as we look at so many different transfer targets that Tottenham have apparently identified and that the fans want to bring in as well. We're going to talk in detail about different positions and different players that we may see at Tottenham in the coming years. But first of all, Alex, as always, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you getting on?
I'm doing good. It's a pleasure to be back on. It's been a little while. I think the last time was the transfer window. I think Nuno depressed everyone, including yourself. So it's good to be back. Yeah. It's good to see the heart in Tottenham fans again.
Yeah, it's certainly been a bit of a roller coaster since that transfer window. But the pleasure is all mine. Again, thank you so much for coming on and joining us. So essentially what we're going to do today is we're going to have a look at kind of what Tottenham need. We're not going to dive too much into the rumour side of things because we're hearing all these different stories. But then Alistair Gold has told us that Antonio Conte hasn't actually really spoken about transfer targets with Fabio Paratici and Daniel Levy just yet. So we're going to leave the rumour mill to the side and we're going to focus purely on fact and these different players that Tottenham could potentially be looking at. But Alex, I suppose the best place to start really is to ask you, as someone who watches so much European football. I honestly can't even keep up with the amount of football you watch, and I'm not the one watching it. But looking at Spurs, what do you think are the most pressing issues and pressing positions for Tottenham to invest in the coming windows?
Yeah, so this is where I really built out the research for this video for people watching. So I was looking at Conte's previous teams and compared with Tottenham and the players they have, and identified a few positions where I think they need to upgrade. I think what the fans feel as well. So I think definitely either side of Romero in a back three, left centre-back and right centre-back, right? 100% need upgrades there. You can't go with Eric Dyer. I think Tanganga will have a bit of a future at right centre-back, though. I think he's be good there. I think wing-backs are good. Emerson, Reguilon might want depth, but I think you're good there. Midfield, I think the issue is with Højbjerg and Skip, they're great, but they're not ball carriers so much. They're good at breaking up play and passing it. Lo Celso's in and out of form, and Ndombele's quite attacking. So you want someone who's going to be a ball carrier in that midfield, and we've got a couple of names there. And then in the attacking positions, I think maybe you want someone ahead of Lucas and or a replacement / sort of bench option for Harry Kane. And a player we've got in is similar to Lautaro Martinez as well. So that also gives Conte that sort of option. I will say, before we go into the targets, unlike the summer where you were linked to literally everyone on the planet, I actually think most of these names are quite gettable. So I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing for Tottenham fans to try and temper the expectations a little bit in terms of the players that we are going to be targeting, because we quite often get carried away with ourselves and we think, last summer there were rumours of Ronaldo and Messi, and I don't think we ever actually expected that to happen, but Tottenham fans have been known to get a bit carried away. But I suppose we'll start naturally at the back, which I think, as I said in my first stream back on Tuesday, I think is the most pressing issue for Tottenham. I know there are other things that need to be addressed, but I think defensively we are still quite weak, and it's probably the reason that we haven't, in that game against Everton, I suppose, didn't see the attack and flair of what Conte can bring, because he's so focused on trying to keep that defence rigid and solid. The first player we're going to talk about is Alessio Romagnoli, the centre-back, of course, for AC Milan. Tell us, what do we need to know?
Yeah, so Romagnoli, he's a player that a few people spoke up on Twitter when we were talking about this video. And also, he is quite gettable because his contract runs out in 2022. For people who don't know about him, he's the previous captain of AC Milan, a 26-year-old centre-back who's right-footed and played, or would play on that right-hand side. Now, he's quite interesting in terms of the fact that he doesn't really shine physically, either in pace or bullying defenders off the ball. And Milan fans have debated over him if he's consistent or not. He's currently been a bit more injured and struggled to get into the team over Simon Kjaer and Tomori. But this is a guy who's been very highly rated since he came out of Roma, just particularly his sort of defensive awareness and his mentality. And there's another player we'll get onto who I think is in that sort of similar vein. But yes, Romagnoli, for the people asked about him, I think he could be a good option for Spurs because he'll be cheap. His contract runs out in 2022, as I said. The only thing you might worry about is kind of how he's going to adapt to the Premier League. Even though he's really good at sort of anticipating where balls will go, he only won 47% of his ground duels last season, which ground duels is the measure of how many 1v1 situations you win, which is quite low. I think Romero is like above 60. But I think this would be a sensible move for Tottenham.
Yeah, look, I think that issue you mentioned there in terms of how they can settle into the Premier League is one that we're probably going to come up with quite a lot when you're looking at this, as Fabrizio Romano put it, the Italian revolution at Tottenham. And it's to be expected that Conte and Paratici, two Italian men who've worked the majority of their career in Italy, they will be targeting players out there. But it could be a good thing. There haven't been many world-class top Italian players in the Premier League in the past, and it's probably a lot fewer than some people might realize. But there is a bit of a theme in that in these targets, which I'm looking forward to diving into a bit more. The next name is one that Spurs fans might be a bit more familiar with, given the goings on in the last couple of years with Steve Hitchen going out to Milan to try and get this deal done. The next name, Alex, is Milan Skriniar.
Yeah, and my notes on Skriniar are a bit quicker because, as you mentioned, he's one who's been consistently linked to Tottenham. But this is the one which not only is far-fetched, but I think Spurs, in some ways, should kind of avoid. So for anyone who's not completely aware, he's a defender at Inter Milan. He shined under Conte. In his first season, he quite struggled, but then he started getting going. And unlike Romagnoli, he's much better defensively, both in the air, on the ground, to bring up the ground duel stat. He's over 60% in both of them. He's clearly a UCL level player, but I think there's two issues, really. One, if you're going to try and tempt it to Tottenham, you're going to need to tempt him away from consistent UCL football. And this is a defender other teams will be interested in. And also from my own perspective, I'm actually not too convinced on him. He can be quite progressive with his passing, but from watching him for Inter Milan this season, maybe I've picked some wrong games, but he's often quite slow with his feet and sort of getting the ball out of his feet and making the pass. Like quite noticeably so, much more slow and older than expected. So especially the fact he'll cost an arm and a leg, I actually don't think Skriniar is the man for Tottenham, but the next one we're going to talk about definitely is. Yeah,
and before we do go down to that next one, I think Milan Skriniar at this point is kind of a player that I know a lot of Tottenham fans love him and do want him, but I feel because we've been so close to getting him in the past and we've been targeting him for so long, I feel like it's not among every Tottenham fan, but among some Tottenham fans, that they still identify him as a target and want to bring him in. But personally, I think the boat has sailed on that one. I think before last season was our best chance to get him, but he really became a mainstay in Conte's team last year. Of course, going on to the title with Inter Milan, and he may, of course, have had his shortcomings, but compared to the season before, it was a good year for him. But the next man on the list, Stefan de Vrij. Or De Vrij.
Yeah, yes. Now, this is one I'd actually be really interested in. At first glance, he really doesn't shine out too much. So right centre-back at Inter Milan, again in this back three, and you can see why the links are coming in. Obviously, former Inter Milan coach, and his contract does run out in 2023. And at 29 years old, you might think this guy's a bit old, but we have to remember with centre-backs that the prime years are a bit older. And De Vrij, he's an interesting player, and I've got a bit about him because he doesn't shine out. I mean, as someone who builds databases of match notes on European football, I write down maybe like 2,000 words per game. In my whole thing, the name De Vrij pops up, I think, once, and it was when he scored an own goal against AC Milan last week. But that's a common thing. Yeah, that's a common thing for most people who watch him. He doesn't shine out, and it's because his idea is similar to Romagnoli. He's not the quickest, and he's not the complete strongest, but he likes to prevent danger before it happens. You rarely see him put high tackles and interceptions. And that's not just an observation. There was a really interesting article done on him recently where in his spare time, or no, if it's just his spare time, every week he'll have 2 or 3 sessions with this private company which give him individual feedback on his games. He's committed to the mental side of the game. He hired, I think it was, I'm going to have to get the word right, a neuro-linguistic coach and another mental coach to focus on his concentration. And the whole point was, it wasn't going through games where, you could have made this tackle better or whatever. It's, you could have closed this space more. So this is a guy who's been switched on for a long time, and he doesn't rely on physical abilities. Even at 29, I think he's going to age well. And I wanted to check to see, is he preventing goals? And after he joined Lazio, I think it's like 2015-16. So in their first season, I'm going to go through the seasons he's played through Lazio and Inter Milan and the goals conceded. He went 52, 51, 49, 33, 36, 35. Downward curve. Wow. And obviously it switches at Inter, but that does kind of play into the idea I've seen of over time he's actually getting better. And this is a guy I think won't cost too much because of his age. I think Conte will like him and want him, and he could slot into the Spurs team well.
That's really interesting. The whole idea of those coaches that he's brought in and all that is something you don't see very often, and like you mentioned, it is an interesting thing when it does happen because that dedication to all that is really interesting. I just a quick special mention, as I always do in every video. I love Alessandro Bastoni. I think he'd be a great signing for Spurs, the other man in that back three. But the worry then is, Inter Milan have apparently said they don't want to sell players this January, especially to Tottenham and Conte and all that, but look, we've heard that all before. I don't think that will make much of a difference in terms of Tottenham's targets for this January. Moving on to a bit of a more right field name, as we were speaking about beforehand. The next one you've listed is Kevin Schlotterbeck.
Yes, for Freiburg. Now, this is a really rogue name, and I think it was sent in by Andresinho on Twitter, it might have been. And I can see why. So, to give a bit of background, to give it early comparison, he's sort of reminiscent of Antonio Rudiger at Chelsea, a left centre back who kind of charges out of the back three, not like blindly, but really good at carrying the ball. Now, he's pretty young. He's 21 years old. He'll be 22 soon. And at Freiburg, which is obviously a team that doesn't really ring many bells, but in the Bundesliga, they're currently third. And I think they have like the second or third best defense in Germany, only behind like Mainz and Bayern Munich. Now, he's quite tall, quite bulky, and as I said, he's good at carrying the ball forward, but he's also good at anticipating his deceptions. He's always winning a lot of aerial and ground duels. He's scored a few goals from corners as well in the air, and he's had quite a long history. He's a new name on the block, but he was playing in the under-19s of the Bundesliga when he was 16, 17 years old. He's quite ahead in his development, and I think he's a name that might become more expensive as time goes on. And see, this left centre-back role, I think that's definitely an area needs filling. And because he's left-footed, he's someone who could do that. And if Tottenham could get him in early, when the price isn't too high, it might actually be quite a smart decision.
I love that. I always love those kind of outside of the box kind of transfer targets and things like that. And Fabio Paratici in the past has done as well. So, maybe this is one that we need to do keep a very close eye on. The next player is one, if I'm not mistaken, does have Premier League experience in Ola Aina.
Yes. Now, these last two names we're going to discuss. These ones that I've thrown in that I think are gettable, and I think Spurs should definitely go for. And I can see kind of going for as well. Ola Aina last season played at Fulham, and he played sometimes at right centre-back and then right wing-back, and he's gone back to Torino, where he's back at left wing-back. So versatile, and he can cover both wings so well. He never does anything too drastically wrong. And really, he's just someone that I think Tottenham should get, because Conte at Inter, he brought in like Alexander Kolarov and Ashley Young to cover his wing-backs positions. And I don't think Tottenham want to do that. And Ola Aina, he's only 25. He's got the Premier League experience, Serie A experience. I really think they should go for him, to be honest. I think it'd be a smart decision. You cover two positions in one go, and it means you don't have to bring in 35-year-olds. So, yeah, just a quick one. I think Ola Aina to Spurs makes a lot of sense.
I think that sort of versatility is something we do need to target, because with a horrific injury record over the last couple of years, and you look at someone like Ben Davis, who is a left back but playing a left centre back at the moment, those players who can kind of move around in positions will be really advantageous to us. And as well with Matt Doherty coming on in left wing back against Everton on Sunday, perhaps we do need a bit more on that side as well. But the last name we have here, another one that Spurs fans will be familiar with, of course, the League Unchampion last season in Sven Botman.
Yes. Now, Zeus asked us on Twitter and said, which players does Alex Sitch get in? I don't understand why no team's got been heavily linked to Sven Botman. The only ones last season, it seemed Wolves and Atalanta were really on the brink of signing the 21-year-old Dutch centre-back who won Lille their title. And he's been a rock. Last season was his first in a top 5 league, but he's hitting 4.7 progressive passes per game, which is far more than Romero and Dyer have been hitting this season. And that's been an issue with Spurs. He's been failing to build from out the back. Botman brings that. He's also left-footed, can play on that left centre-back side. And for someone so young, he's so physically built. He's 6'4", and unlike the other centre backs we've mentioned, he's actually very quick and also very strong. There's just the only, not even a question, but he's going to make still some small errors, nothing major. He's not cost Lille any games really, but he can be quite casual on the ball. But I think over time, this guy's really going to shine. And Tottenham, again, they need to get in early for this guy. I couldn't believe Wolves were the only team coming in, and Lille, they're not going to be able to sell too high, because even though Liga is kind of rebounding financially, Lille still aren't in the best of situations. And if Tottenham could be the club that gets Sven Botman in, then that would be a fantastic move.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that the surprise that no one was really in for him last summer. And it was just the situation that Lille are in. The way the season kind of went, it felt like the Ajax 2019 season, that they did so well, had so many players in that team, young players coming through. With Ajax, you kind of knew they were all going to move on. And I felt the situation was the same with Lille. I know they did lose a few of them, like Mike Maignan, but with Christophe Galtier moving on to Nice as well, I was really surprised that Sven Botman was a player that there wasn't a tug of war for him to try and get him out. But with that pace down that left-hand side, I think it's something that could be really crucial for Tottenham, with the advanced fullbacks being able to cover that space. He's one that I'll be continuing to keep a very close eye on. But I'm going to put you on the spot here and say, out of those 6 centre-backs, who should Tottenham target the most?
Ooh. Okay, so if we're just picking one, I'd probably back Botman purely because I think even when Conte leaves and if the club wants to go to a back four, then Botman could shift into back four. And I was just thinking him and Romero is a tasty defensive pairing. And
sounds nice.
Yeah, and just to split it, I guess, because if we're talking Conte and we want left centre back and right centre back, I'd probably go Botman on the left, or if we're talking financially, maybe, and you want to spend a bit more, maybe De Vrij on the right and Schlotterbeck on the left. I think that way that costs a bit cheaper, and you're sorting out the defence pretty well there.
I love it. I really hope we do get 2 centre backs because we absolutely do need it. But look, moving on to midfielders, and as you mentioned, what Tottenham are missing in there at the moment is that ball carrying type of player. And I spoke about this again on Tuesday in terms of the formation that we're playing at the moment is, of course, the 3-4-3. But I think we need to get that extra man in the middle. Now that could be made a little less important if we manage to replace one of the players in the middle with a ball carrier. I think Højbjerg and Skip together do very well. But because we're missing that dynamic, in the way I described it, what we're starting to see with those patterns of play at the back compared to what we know can happen up top with the likes of Kane and Son, we just need something to link that together. And I don't think it's going to be the wing backs as much as it needs to be. So I think that ball carrying midfielder or even a bit of a playmaker there could be what Tottenham need. Look, let's dive into the targets. Another Inter Milan player in Marcelo Brozovic.
Yeah, obviously going to notice the trend because all the rumours are saying Inter Milan and Conte wants to raid their players who are closing in their contracts. And Brozovic, again, is one of them. Contract up in 2022. And the 28-year-old has always impressed in Inter Milan. So technically gifted on the ball. I think I kind of describe him with Jorginho, but with a bit more athleticism and maybe a bit less tempo control. So I think that's an underrated quality of Jorginho. Brozovic is more of a defensive midfielder who is quite quick, but fantastic at laying passes, fantastic at keeping the ball. And a lot of people mentioned him straight away about a midfielder for Tottenham to sign. And even though he's brilliant, I will say, as we mentioned, a ball carrier, Brozovic isn't just quite that. So even though he'd be a great signing, maybe the other names we're about to get onto might be better ones.
Mm-hmm. And just to touch on quickly about that, the situation with Inter Milan and those contracts running down, the financial situation that club is in could play a big part in how many of those contracts they are able to renew and how many players they may manage to attempt to keep at the club. I know there's talk of PIF, the new Newcastle owners, potentially investing in Inter Milan. But if that doesn't happen, the current Chinese owners of Inter are in dire financial straits. And that could decide who stays and who goes. But moving across the city of Milan to their rivals and the midfielder that has been the only name you see on Spurs Twitter at times over the last couple of weeks, and that is Franck Kessié.
Yes, Franck Kessié. Now, Kessié, I really do think this makes a lot of sense. But I will say one thing. He often gets described sometimes as a goal-scoring midfielder, which is an easy mistake to make. Last season, he scored 11 goals for Milan, I believe, or 13 goals. And the reason I'm mixing those numbers up is because 11 of those were penalties. So absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not. Yeah, not a goal-scoring midfielder. But to excite Spurs fans, I actually think this is as close as you can get to finally having a Moussa Dembele replacement. Kessié, look at the face on that.
That sounds good.
Like many people describing, I think this is the same for Dembele. Good in all areas and no real weakness, and a fantastic ball carrier and passer. This is the guy you can put into this Spurs midfield. He won't jeopardize the defense. It's not like putting Pogba next to McTominay where you're just leaving one of their own. Kessié is defensively aware. However, he's brilliant at moving the ball up the pitch and that box-to-box role. Yeah, so I think Kessié, with, again, a continuous trend, contract up in 2022. He will be a name most people are after because he's 25 years old and he's hitting his prime. And I do think Spurs might have to fight to get him, but it's possible. With Conte in, I think it's possible to get him in.
I do agree with you on that one. I think some Spurs fans, given the hype around Kessié in the last couple of weeks, may have watched him for the first time in that Milan derby on Sunday, which I would say maybe isn't the best game to kind of take a look at what he actually does, because I think he started that game in centre back and gave away a penalty as well. So maybe if you did watch that game, just ignore it for now and hope that Tottenham can get something done there. The next name is a player that I put out there as one of Fabio Paratici's better signings in what he managed to do during his time at Juventus. And it's one that I actually spoke about with Fabrizio Romano, kind of similar to the Brian Gill signing when he brought him in at Juventus from Schalke, is one of those that just happened out of the blue, done in 24 hours, deal done, and that was for Weston McKennie. Yes.
Now, McKennie, I haven't actually watched too much of him because, especially this season, he hasn't played so much. He doesn't seem to be in favour, and that's why the move is really starting to gain a bit more traction now. Now, McKennie, I think if we're talking, we had a Dembele replacement before. I think McKennie's a good sort of Sissoko replacement. I think he's a versatile player who, again, is like not excellent at one thing, but good in most areas. And he's still 23 years old. So I think there's a lot of time to mold him under the right coach. And yeah, similar to Sissoko, I think you can get a lot out of him in lots of different areas. And I think he does make a lot of sense for Spurs. And I reckon he won't be too expensive.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he's a very talented player. On the pitch, he makes a lot of sense. But if we're talking about Daniel Levy, off the pitch, he makes a lot of sense as well. Because with Levy really trying to break into that US market with these NFL deals and all that, bringing in someone like McKennie. I mean, you have to mention it when it comes to Daniel Levy. Bringing in someone like McKennie, who's of course a mainstay in that US national team, could be a good marketing move as well. The next name we have is Lucas Paqueta.
Yes, former Milan player. Paqueta is a player I absolutely adored. I can't remember who suggested it. But again, this is a guy I do think is going to be gettable, not necessarily maybe for Tottenham. They can fight for him. But he plays at Lyon, and Lyon are going in and out of form at the moment under Peter Bosch. I mean, Champions League football in France, you have to finish top 3 to get it. So it could be a bit ropey if they do finish in low spots. But Paqueta has been the shining light for Lyon since he joined. I think it is in 2019. Most people probably heard of his name either on FIFA or on YouTube when his compilations are getting 10 million views before he moved to Europe. Like this really silky, ridiculously talented and skillful midfielder, Brazilian midfielder. And he moved to Milan. It didn't really work out because he was played sort of out of position. And he came to Lyon, and he's been delightful because the way he plays is like he's got the attacking skillful ability. Like best way to describe him, not Ronaldinho level, but sort of that flair, that flamboyance, right? But in France, he's been given sort of this defensive rigidity, and now he's kind of like this box-to-box midfielder who can push higher up. But at times at Lyon last season, he was playing in the midfield 2 in a 4-2-3-1, and this year now he's playing sort of right attacking midfield. He's such a technically brilliant player who can score goals but also cover defensively. I'm not sure how much he'll cost, maybe 30 to 40 million, but as well, he's so hardworking that even though you guys have got bad experience with buying from Lyon, arguably after all the troubles and Dembele has put you through, and the delights, I think Paqueta's a different attitude, and whichever club brings him in is getting a fantastic player.
Yeah, no, I agree. He's one of those players that, just like you mentioned, has that flair, and let's not get too drawn into the YouTube compilations and stuff like that. But the ability is there, and it's just about getting him into a team, a position somewhere where he is comfortable and can show the better sides of his game. But he's certainly a very interesting shout. But the last midfielder we have is his teammate Houssem Aouar.
Yes. Now, Aouar's a year younger. Paqueta's 24 and Aouar's 23. And of course, he's been perennially linked to Arsenal and Tottenham, and no club has gone for him yet, which is frustrating. I can understand why. Last season, he fell out of the coach Rudy Garcia at Lyon, so he didn't get to play as much. But still, when he was playing, he was in the top 10 in France for shot-creating actions penalty. I think he was top of Lyon's squad for like carries into the box. And one thing Spurs are struggling this season is getting the ball into the box and creating shots where you're finishing so low, which is sad. I think I did a thread the other day on Twitter about the top stats, and in a non-penalty XG penalty, I think Spurs have created the 5th least in Europe, which was hilarious, unless you're a Tottenham fan.
No, that's not funny at all.
Good old Nuno tax. But yeah, Aouar, he can play. If you want a more of attacking midfielder, this is maybe the guy. If Conte goes to a 3-5-2, I'd like Aouar in behind the 2 strikers. He completes over 2 dribbles per 90, and he kind of moves to the left as well to carry the ball into the box. Maybe he can alternate with Son, not necessarily like in positions, but more on the pitch. Yeah, I think, especially since I think his contract's up in 2023, and the value is just going to keep going down from like the 30 million he was costing in the summer. I think Tottenham, it would make sense to get him in. I guess the only thing questionable is how dedicated his attitude is. So that's something that's been brought up. But I think Aouar does make some sense. Yeah,
look, on the mention of those 2 players, I think from kind of memory with Tottenham, going and buying players from Lyon is never easy. I remember when he got Lloris back in 2012 and then Dembele in 2019, Jean-Michel Aulas was just an absolute nightmare. In I think both those deals within 48 hours of them getting done, he said, no, we're not selling him. So I think Tottenham may be a bit
that's the interesting thing about that. So Aulas is always been his motto. He's always been big on numbers, and his motto is this player is not for sale. I'll never sell him until the internal price is met. And once that price is met, straight away. So that's exactly why you're feeling that way.
Yeah, a bit like Daniel Levy, if you ask me. Look, there's 5 really, really good targets there, all of which will massively improve Tottenham, and that problem we're identifying and being able to get that ball from defence to attack. But again, Alex, of those 5, if you had to pick one player for Spurs to bring in, who would you recommend?
I'll keep this one quick. I think it'd be Franck Kessié. I think you'd be replacing Dembele finally in a lot of aspects. It'll be tough to get him, but with his contract running out, he is somewhat gettable. I think he'd be perfect for Spurs.
I love it. All we need, all this club needs, is a Moussa Dembele replacement. Look, if we can get that in Kezia, I'll have to agree with you then as well and say we need to go with that one. Look, moving on to the front line, and a position that we've spoken about every single window for 4, 5, 6 years with Spurs, and trying to get that back up, or what could be in a 3-5-2 maybe with Conte, a partner for Harry Kane. And the first name that we have, another one Spurs fans will be familiar with, and it's the Fiorentina striker Dusan Vlahovic.
Yes, and I think Vlahovic is an interesting one because he's always been spoken about for Spurs and Arsenal as well in the summer. But I think he's getting somewhat a little overhyped. I mean, since the beginning of 2021, he's scored 29 goals for Fiorentina in the league, which is brilliant, but 10 of those were penalties, so it's actually 19 goals. Again, it's the Kessié effect. It's the, oh, wow, that sounds great, never mind. But obviously, he's still very talented. I think he's more bow-footed than some of the stats would suggest. I think he's only scored 1 goal with his right foot this season. I think he's actually quite good on it. I think he's very similar in profile to Harry Kane, and maybe Spurs want the budget to replace Harry Kane now and expect him to leave. This somewhat does make sense, but I feel like the squad needs other money spent in other areas. And with Conte, I think Kane's more inclined to stay. So I'm not sure if Vlahovic should be my number 1 target in strikers. I think there are cheaper options out there.
The only reason why I don't expect to see him joining Spurs is because of that asking price, which is up at 70-80 million over the summer from Fiorentina. And for a while, it did almost feel as though if Man City met our asking price for Kane, then we'd move for Vlahovic and potentially Lautaro Martinez as well. But like you say, there's so many other things we need to address. While we do need a backup striker, that much money just isn't really a viable thing for us to do. Despite that report, actually, in the last couple of days, that Tottenham can spend up to £400 million without being caught by the financial fair play rules. But it's great to have that ability, but it's not great that we probably don't have that money. But Vlahovic probably an option, as you mentioned, if Harry Kane does leave. The next player we have there is Alvarez. I'm not quite sure who that is.
Oh, yes. See, I wasn't sure until a couple of weeks ago. I've only really recently done work into him now because he doesn't play in Europe. He plays in Argentina. And I mean, straight away, I'm going to lure you in with his stats this season. He's played 20 games, I believe. I mean, actually, these are big numbers, so I want to make sure I don't mess this up. Yes, 20 games, and he's got 20 goals and assists in that time. 15 goals, okay. 5 assists, playing sort of a striker and sort of moving to the left, mainly up front, completing over two dribbles per 90. And the instant counter to that is, it's the Argentina League. How do we know how good that is? Well, there are some answers to that, and this is where you get the true learning on the Matt Hayes Tottenham Blog channel. Now, there's been some analysis into ranking global leagues, and the Argentina League goes a lot higher than you think. It's actually ranked in the top 10, above the Portuguese League and slightly below Ligue 1. I think really the thing that suffers in Argentina is a lack of quality coaching. But guess who Julian Alvarez's coaches? It's Marcelo Gallardo at River Plate. So
there we go.
You've got that answer sorted. And I think this isn't a player running hot. I'm not even sure I've mentioned his age. He's 21 years old. He's only really blowing up now. And it's not a case of running hot, in my opinion. I mean, he's averaging just over 3 shots per game. For context, I was reading a piece by Sam Maguire the other day, who's a well-known analyst, and he said that players who are averaging over 4 shots in like lower leagues and scoring a lot of goals, you should probably ignore because you can imagine their goals are going to come down. Alvarez instead, he's in the right sort of ballpark and hasn't scored any penalties in those number of goals as well. So not the Vlahovic effect. Yeah, I think he's bound to explode. And also there's lots of Argentinian players that have done well out of the league, or other players come out of the Argentinian league straight into big European teams. I mean, Rodrigo Bentancur at Juventus is one, Benedetto at Marseille, Juan Foyth at Spurs, Correa at Atletico Madrid. I think it's a matter of time till one team goes in for Alvarez. And the final nail in the coffin for this one, really, for me, is that the scouts that have been watching him, mainly from Serie A, they've very much likened him to Lautaro Martinez, who did brilliantly up front for Antonio Conte. So if Conte wants to play a 3-5-2 or 2 up front, whether it is this season or next season, I think Alvarez would be a cheap and very interesting option.
You're teasing me with this. That comparison to Lautaro Martinez. Oh, I need to start watching compilations. Oh, that sounds too good to be true. But I'll take your word for it. He's definitely a player I'm going to look into. Playing under Marcelo Gallardo. If you're looking at the South American leagues, he's probably one of the best, if not the best managers there. So that's an encouraging one for us as well. The next name is one that has been going around the last 24 or so hours after a story from Calcio Mercato, and that is the Club Brugge forward Charles de Ketelaere.
Yeah, and this was going to be quite quick because I've watched quite a bit of Club Brugge this season, and there's been a surprising amount of links with him to big European teams. I don't think he's ready yet. He's only 20 years old. He has 8 goals and assists this season. He's completing a lot of dribbles. To give a bit of a profile of him, he's quite tall, fairly strong, but not overly in a way like Vlahovic, and he's not very quick. He's good in these link-up play, but he is playing for one of the best teams in Belgium in a sort of quite a weak league, and I think he needs to move to a different European league first. I think he was promising, but I think if he's coming to Spurs now, he'd probably need to be loaned out straight away. And I think people wanting to Ketelaere in might not be the best name.
From that because you're absolutely spot on. But I love watching him play for Club Brugge. Like, honestly, him, Noah Lang, they're 2 incredible players. And just from how much I enjoy watching him, I'd love to see him at Spurs. But you're probably right. He may need a kind of stepping stone in between before making that move, or it could be, as Tottenham have done, for example, with Pape Matar Sarr. If we want to get him in and then maybe loan him back out to Bruges for 6, 12, 18 months, whatever it is, that could be an option. But he's certainly a player for the future and one to keep an eye on, who I do think will have a very successful career. The last name we have on our list is the Juventus player Dejan Kulusevski.
Yes. Now, he's not strictly a striker, although he has played there. This is a player, again, sort of like McKennie, who's really been surplus to requirements in some ways. I mean, is a great example. I think he's played 2 seasons now, or a season and a half at Juventus, and he's played less minutes for Juve than he did in one season for Parma, which is in 1920. Played about 1,000 minutes less, which shows at a 21-year-old, the Swedish players, he's not really got into the team. But this is a guy who got 19 goals and assists as like a 19-year-old, I think, in Serie A. Really interesting play. He's quite tall. He's not super quick as a winger, but he's very good on the ball. He likes luring players in before beating past them with great balance and good footwork. And yeah, he's got a contract up to 2025, but under Allegri, he's just not really featured. I think he's only got a handful of appearances this season. And there is a bit of backstory to him because there's lots of people who really like this guy, by the way. Doogie Critchley of Football Daily has said multiple times he would love Spurs to get this guy in. And that's because he moved to Atalanta when he was 16 and he was playing in the under-17s league. It's like 15, 16-year-old. And he got 17 goals in 22 games. A lot of class on this guy. And I think Juve, even if they're not willing to sell him yet, his contract's to 2025, I think they'd be willing to loan him out. And I think he's a massive upgrade on Lucas Moura. And he can fill in for Kane because he has played up front too. I think this would be quite a solid pick for me.
Yeah, look, I think you may have threatened yourself there by saying he's better than Lucas Moura. Some Spurs fans may not be happy. But look, I do agree that Lucas at times just isn't really consistent enough. He plays well, he's incredible. Like, I'd go back to example for that EFL Cup final against Man City in the kind of latter stages of the first half, early second half. He was the reason that we weren't penned back, and he just has that ability to completely transition from defense and attack by just taking on 3 or 4 men. Someone maybe a bit more orthodox and more of an end product could be an option for us there in Kulusevski. I think I know your answer to this question, but out of those 4, if you had to pick one for Spurs, who would it be?
You might not know the answer because I'm actually talking. It's definitely between Alvarez and Kulusevski. I mean, I might slightly lean to Kulusevski, even though Alvarez looks so good. Just I guess Kulusevski's a little more proven, but that's the idea of loaning him in. I think if I was buying both, I reckon Alvarez would cost a lot less. And I think that just might be a slightly interesting move where even if he doesn't work out, the important thing is I reckon you can make quite a lot of money on him. I reckon some team would pick him up and see what he did in Argentina and find value in it. So I think I'd probably go for Julian Alvarez.
Okay, I love it. That's the answer I was expecting. Well, look, we've really dived into 14 different players there. I hope everyone watching, well, I know everyone watching has learned something they didn't know, as you always do when Alex is on the channel. But Alex, let people know where we can find you on Twitter, TikTok, YouTube, whatever platform you want to plug. Let us know about it.
Yeah, you can come and follow me at EuroExpert on any of the platforms Matt kindly suggested. There'll be a video on YouTube actually tomorrow, because this video goes up tonight, on the new Rangers manager, or potential new Rangers manager, Giovanni Van Bronckhorst. You don't need to be a Rangers fan to enjoy it. There's like 2 minutes at the end where I talk about that. But this is possibly one of the most exciting managers in the game, up and coming. So if you want to learn about the man who broke the Ajax and PSV dominance in the Netherlands with Feyenoord in his first managerial job, I'd go to my YouTube channel and watch that video tomorrow.
I can guarantee I'm going to go and watch that, because I'm actually really intrigued by that potential move from Bronckhorst to Rangers. But look, Alex, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. I really appreciate your time and your insight. Everyone, make sure to say your thanks to Alex there in the comments below. Let us know, out of the players we discussed, which ones you think may be the best option for Tottenham. If there's any players you think we missed, I might look a bit more into them in the coming weeks and coming months. We'll have a bit more of an analysis on them, and when we come into what will hopefully be a very exciting and very busy transfer window for Tottenham. But we are going to leave it there. Thank you everyone who's watched. Do make sure to hit that like button if you haven't already. Make sure to check out all of Alex's platforms in the description below, and make sure to subscribe here as well for more of these videos coming forward. And we're going to be very busy on the channel in the January window, as we always are. So Alex, for joining me again, thank you, and to everyone who watched, as always, thanks for watching.